This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. I would like to present to you today a Lamdasha topic, a very Geshmaka kasha, and I want to show how when you have a kasha, there could be two potential styles of approach to answer the question. One b'derech Iyun and one b'derech Bekiyus. This past Wednesday night, for those who were there, remember we said the Chodash of the century. We explained why sometimes it's necessary in a shir to say, fasten your seatbelts. For those who heard it, they heard it. For those who didn't hear it, your grandmother must have davened very well that you should hear it again now. And basically, it goes like this. You know, when it comes to Kedusha, you can't just jump in. You can't just jump into Kedusha. What do you need to do? What do you need to do for Kedusha? You have to prepare yourself. By the way, this is mamish a geshmak of art. The shaila is, you know, Chazal say that Haman went. Okay, al ha'etz asher heichin lai, that Haman went to hang Mordechai on the tree that he prepared for him. So the Gemara asks, the word loy is extra. It should say on the tree that he prepared. Alo eitz asher heichin. Why alo eitz asher heichin loy? Tana loy heichin. He was really preparing it for himself, which in fact was the case. Haman was really preparing the tree for himself. So the question is, how do Chazal know he was really preparing it for himself? Just because there's an extra word? Maybe he was preparing it for Mordechai. How do we know he was really preparing it for himself? So the Belzer Rebbe says, because it says Heichen. Heichen is a lashon of Hachana. Hachana is only for Dvar Mitzvah. There's no Inyan of Hachana for an Aveira. So what mitzvah was Haman being Meichen for? It says Al Eitz Asher Heichen Lai. He was doing Hachana de Kedusha. Must be the great mitzvah of Mechias Amalek. He was doing Hachana to be Moich Haman. So when it comes to Kedusha, you need Hachana. That's why before Kiddush, we tell everyone, no, Herzachain, Savri Maranan, listen up. Or, let's say you bench. You can't just bench. You say everyone, Rabbi Sai, Mervel bench, and Rabbi Sai, you ready for this? Or you're just going to sit there like a lump, twiddling your thumbs. Wake up. So the question is, what do you do by learning? What Hachana do you by learning? The answer is, they are masakein, that before you learn something geshmak, you say fasten your seatbelts. It's like Savri Maranan. It's like Rabbi Simon Valenbenchen. Also, Reb Schwab says, Rabbi Baruch. What's Baruch? Let's go, everyone. You're gonna bless Hashem, or you're just gonna sit around? Baruch, you're gonna bet with? We say, yeah, we're gonna do it. Baruch. Okay, so that's our hachana for today's shir. It's mamish geshmak kasha. Okay, the Gemara says in Megillah on Hey Amud Beis, Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Nata Netia B'Purim. Rabbi had some unusual practices. Rabbi planted a tree on Purim. If you want a deeper explanation in Rabbi planting the tree, get the pocket-size edition of the Revealed and the Concealed. And then you could get the regular-size edition also. But it's not in the Hebrew Sefer. Okay, that's a shtickle, it's not in the Hebrew Sefer. It came after. Okay, why Rabbi planted a tree on Purim? Next, V'rachatz b'kroina shel tzipori b'shavasa b'tamaz. Rebbe bathed in a wagon in Tzipori on the 17th day of Tammuz. If you want to know why Rebbe did that, look in the Sefer, The Darkness and the Dawn, in the regular sized edition. Okay? But now we're going to discuss the third practice of Rebbe. Ubikesh lakar Tisha B'Av. He wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. I know you also want to uproot Tisha B'Av, but not for the same reason. Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. Frak Toisvis, Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. How could Rebbe uproot Tisha B'Av? The first kasha of Toisvis that we're not going to deal with today is, the Gemara says in Tainus, anyone who eats and drinks on Tisha B'Av will not see the joy of Jerusalem. But we're going to focus on Toisvis' second kasha. Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av, but there's a klal in Shas. You ready? Ein bezdin yachal levatel divrei bezdin chaveroi ela imkein gadol mimenu b'chachma uvaminyan. A later court cannot override the ruling of an earlier court unless it's greater in wisdom and in number. And Rebbe's court was not greater than the original court that enacted Tisha B'Av. Who enacted Tisha B'Av? Nevi'im. The Navi Zechariah talks about Tisha B'Av. So how could Rebbe have tried to uproot Tisha B'Av? Rebbe is less great, both in number, both in wisdom and in number. So how could Rebbe try to uproot Tisha B'Av? You hear the kasha of Tosfos. What's the kasha? Say the kasha, Ariel. What's the kasha?
How Rebbe can uproot Tisha B'Av if he was this is the knowledge and the number.
So Ariel was saying Tosfos kasha. How could Rebbe try to uproot Tisha B'Av? But he's not as great in wisdom and number as the earlier court. We're going to focus on Tosfos' second answer. When the Gemara says that Rebbe wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av, let's explain. The Gemara says in the end of Tainis that Rabbi Yochanan says that if he would have been around when Tisha B'Av was formulated, he would have made it not on the 9th, he would have made it on the 10th. Why? Because the Beis Hamikdash burnt down on the 10th. When we go to Shul, Tisha B'Av night, to say Kinnis, historically, what happened that night? Nothing. And when we come in the morning and we have to listen to drashas for many hours, what happened? Nothing. And in the afternoon, when you have to go watch movies the whole day, what happened then? Nothing. Then by the end of the day, when everybody's happy because Tisha B'Av is over, that's when they burnt down the Beis Hamikdash, and it burnt on the 9th and the 10th. But it primarily burnt down on the 10th. Says Rabbi Yochanan, if I was around, I would have made Tisha B'Av on the 10th. Rabbi Yochanan's lashon is ilu havai hasam kavati b'asiri. Says Tosfos, when the Gemara says Rebbe wanted to be Aikar Tisha B'Av, he didn't want to uproot it, he wanted to tweak the calendar date from the 9th to the 10th. What do we see from Tosfos? But still, how could Rebbe have done that? He's not as great in wisdom and in number. Must be, we see from Tosfos, uprooting is a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Avatel. Tweaking a date is permitted even if you're not as great in wisdom and a number. You see from Tosfos that a lesser court can't uproot, but it could tweak. Good? That's the side we see from Tosfos. Here's the problem. There's a Gemara in Megillah. You don't have to get too far in Megillah to get to this Gemara. It's the very first step in the Gemara Megillah. The Gemara says, Megillah Nikreis, B'Yud Aleph, B'Yud Beis, B'Yud Gimel, B'Yud Daled, B'Tes Vav. By the way, you know the amazing remez. These 5 numbers add up to 65. The name of Hashem. Like Pachos Lo Yoser, not 10 and 16. There's no Shem Havaya on the Megillah. Fine. So Gemara asks, it must be that 11, 12, and 13 were enacted by the Anshe Knesset Agdola. Because if they were enacted by a later court, if the Anshe Knesset Agdola only enacted 14 and 15, and the Bezdin of Cedarhurst came and said, no, you could also do 11, 12, 13, how could they do such a thing? Ein Bezdin, Yachal, Levatel, Divrei, Bezdin, Chaveroi, Ella, Himkein, Gado, Mimenu, Chacham, Minyan. It can't be a later court made 11, 12, and 13. It had to have been the very Anshe Knesset Agdola who enacted 14 and 15. They were the ones who made 11, 12, and 13. Because if they only made 14 and 15, and 11, 12, and 13 were made by a later court, but that's a violation of a later court cannot uproot the ruling of an earlier court unless they're greater in wisdom and number. Mamish Pele Atzuma. What's the Gemara talking about? But what's the kasha on the Gemara? What's the obvious question over here?
It's not like that.
Why is it not like Tosfos?
Because it's only tweaking, it's not being malakir.
So Ba'as is asking a Gvaldige Stira. Why is the Gemara so sure that the Anshe Knesset Agdola had to enact 11, 12, and 13? Because if it was a later court, it's a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Levatel Divrei Bezin Chaveroi. Elam Kein Gado Mimenu Chacham Minyan. But what do you mean? They're not uprooting. They're just tweaking a calendar date. And Tosfos established a principle that tweaking a calendar date is not a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Levatel Divrei Bezin Chaveroi. Elam Kein Gado Mimenu Chacham Minyan. Got the kasha? Who's going to say over the kasha? Go for it, Nissim.
that we had established that the courts of a later date, of a later time, can in fact tweak, not uproot, the rulings of an earlier court.
So how could
we?
How could the Gemara say on Daf Beis what? That 11, 12, and 13 had to have been enacted by Anshe Knesset Agdoila. Why couldn't they be enacted even by a later court? Very good. And that's not a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Avatel Devrei Bezin Chaveroi Elam Kein Gadol Menu Mechacham of Minyan. You know whose kasha this is? Besides Rabasi and Reb Nissim, this is the kasha of Hagois Mayim Chaim. The Hagois Mayim Chaim is a Pri Chodash. The Pri Chodash was the Rav in Yerushalayim. He established a custom to give Shalach Manas on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Do you remember that? He was a rabbi in Yerushalayim. First he was offered to be the rabbi in Amsterdam for a very big salary. And he was about to accept it, and then he said, no thank you. So they said, why? He said, because you don't want me to be your rabbi, you just want me to fill the position. But as soon as I tell you what to do, you're not going to listen to me, and it's not going to be pretty. So, I'm out of here. And what does the Chidah say? Fortunate is his share in this world and in the world to come. That was the accolade of the Pri Chodash. In any event, I was just in Livorno, and I was at the kever of the Rebbe of the Pri Chodash, Rabbi Yehuda Saraf. This is the kasha of the Pri Chodash. There's a stira between the Chiddush of Tosfos and the Gemara Megillah Daf Beis. So now I want to share with you a few possible answers, and I want you to tell me if the answer is an Iyun answer or a Bekiyus answer. Okay?
Just go Chachma and Minyan. So
yeah.
Who's that?
Minyan is the size of the court.
Right.
Chachma. How do we determine a person's Chachma? They have an app. You know, I don't know. How do we determine the level of someone's Chachma? I don't know. You have in the Gemara, let's say Shammai and Hillel. The Gemara says Shammai were Charifi Tvei. How did the Gemara know that? They were able to measure. I don't know. So let's start with the answer of the Rashash. The answer of the Rashash asks this question in number 5, and he says, V'li nira on the second line, third line, the Rebbe haya toila the mashakavu betes haya oz machmas kilkol cheshboinais. Like Tosfos says in the Yerushalmi, u'v'kazel lo shayach hada ein bezdin kamash kasav ha-Tosfos kaman. The Rashash is saying that what Rebbe meant to uproot Tisha B'Av from the 9th to the 10th was he was saying that they got the wrong date. They made a mistake. He's not saying I want to uproot it. He's saying that they were misinformed. Because of the confusion of the times, in the times that Tisha B'Av was enacted, they made an error based on false information. Now that the dust has settled and we have the true, accurate report of when the Beis Hamikdash was burnt down, now we're able to establish Tisha B'Av on the right date. That's not a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Avato Devrei Bezin Chaveroi. Ein Bezin Yachal Avato Devrei Bezin Chaveroi is one rabbi says, I hold of this svara, and a later rabbi says, no, you're wrong. I see it this way. Say, rabbi number 2. You're not greater in wisdom, you're not greater in number, you can't argue with the logic of the earlier court. But if the later court is saying, no, you prematurely established Tisha B'Av. You didn't have the right information. You thought the Beis Hamikdash burnt down on the 9th. Now that the dust has settled, we established a special, we established a special office to study, to investigate. A special commission. We established a special commission to investigate when the Beis Hamikdash was burnt down, and you got it wrong. We're telling you the right information. So you're right. We're not as great. We happen to know better.
This is what I'm talking about, by Rosh Chodesh. It was wrong.
So by Rosh Chodesh, there's a special Gzeros HaKasav. that whether right or wrong, we just follow what the Bezdin says. It doesn't matter. We don't care whether they're right or wrong. We darshan atem, atem, atem. Atem afilu shoygagim, atem afilu mezidim, atem afilu muta'im. But legabe, the kaviyos of other yomim tovim, we don't have such a drasha. And if it's wrong, the later court could say it's wrong, we're going to change the date. What would you say this kind of answer is? I would say it's not Iyun and it's not Bekiyus. It's like, there's a pejorative phrase, they say, a balabatasha answer. Not that it's a true yisoid, that if it's based on false information, a later court could change it. But I don't know if this is necessarily Iyun or Bekiyus.
When was test established?
In the times of the Nevi'im.
So, how far away from the event?
The next year.
So, it's not Mustafa, an answer.
Why? They got the wrong date. They mamish got the wrong date. I'll give you an example. The Bavli says that the first Beis Hamikdash was surrounded. Where's a Rosh Hashanah? You have a Gemara Rosh Hashanah here? Basically, the second Beis Hamikdash, we know the walls were breached on the 17th. What about the first Beis Hamikdash? So the Bavli says it was the 9th. The Yushalmi says it was the 17th. But the Pasuk says it was the 9th. So Taisa says the Pasuk got it wrong. Why? They were so confused that in the thick of it, they didn't even know what day it was. Chas v'sham, it doesn't mean the Pasuk got it wrong. What it means is to preserve the confusion of the times. They wrote the date the people thought it was, even though it wasn't that date. In other words, they were so confused, they literally were 8 days off. So there's such an idea that at the time, it was so harrowing that they didn't even know what day it was. Okay, that's the first answer. Next answer. If you look in the Gemara Megillah on the side of the page, there's a Gilyon. A Gilyon is like an old comment. I'm not sure who it's by. A Gilyon. It's like from one of the original printings of the Gemara. One of the Chachamim put on the side of the Gemara the following yisoid. The Gilyon is bothered. If you look at number 6, there's no way Rabbi Yochanan, who said if I would have been around, I would have made Tisha B'Av on the 10th. You know what Rabbi Yochanan is saying? That in the year they made Tisha B'Av, the original Bezdin that made Tisha B'Av, most Dayanim said let's make it on the 9th. Some Dayanim said make it on the 10th. And they took a vote, and they voted to make it on the 9th. But it's not that it was definitive. It was not unanimous. Most Dayanim said the 9th. Some said the 10th. In such a case where we already had a Das Yachid originally to make it on the 10th, then a later court could come along and say, you know what? Let's tweak it to the 10th. Why? But they're not as great in wisdom and number. No, this position already existed and was entertained by the earlier court. In such a scenario, a later court has the authority to come and tweak it to the 10th.
Is that a Bekiyus or an Iyun? What was the first one?
No, so the first one we said was not really either. It was sort of like a matter of the facts. What would you say about this kind of answer? And by the way, this is based on, now how do you know that if the earlier court overrode a Das Yachid, a later court could then follow that Das Yachid? It's a Mishnah Nidyas. It's a Mishnah Nidyas. So would you call this Iyun, or would you call this Bekiyus?
You have to work a minute, so it sounds like Bekiyus.
This is what we call Bekiyus answer. Why? Because you have a question to something, and the two cases seem identical. Both cases, a later court is tweaking a date established by an earlier court. Now, all you need is an outside piece of information that when the later court is merely going like a Das Yachid that the earlier court entertained, it is permitted for a later court to follow that ruling. So that's what we call a Bekiyus answer. Bekiyus, in other words, you're not using analysis, you're not using amkus, you're using a piece of information that perhaps somebody didn't know. This is a classic Bekiyus answer to a Lamda Shakasha. Okay? Now there's an answer that Maharitz Chios gives, and I want to share it with you, because he bases it on a Yad Malachi, and I was just at the kever of the Yad Malachi, or Malachi HaKoyin in Livorno. I don't really understand it, but I'm just going to share it with you. He says that he asked the question, he says that how could Tosfos say it's not considered an akira, but the Gemara in Daf Beis Amud Aleph says it is an akira. So if you look at number 8, v'tzarach loymar, like 2/3 of the way down, the first word on the line is le akiras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 lines up from the bottom. V'tzarach loymar de bevadai akira mizman lezman akirahu. To tweak a date is definitely an akira. V'shani hacha mishum sheyesh tam v'siba la'akira zais. You know why they're allowed to do it? Because there's a logic to do it. The logic is the Beis Hamikdash burnt down on the 10th. Mishum sheruba shalecha nisraf bay. To move the laning of the 11, 12, and 13, there's no reason to do that. So to do it is an akira. But to move it from the 10th, the 9th to the 10th, there is a svara to do that. That's not a violation. Umikan hevesiraya l'shitas harav shita mekubetzas. On the Gemara lidroi shalhu da'oina shari. Right where the Gemara asks, why don't we darshan oinus is permitted? What do you mean? But the earlier court already made a ruling regarding that issue. He says it's muva, it's brought in the Sefer Yad Malachi, dehecha deyesh tam v'svara, dim hayu hamesaknim shoymim tanas hameshivim ulai hayu maidim. Whenever you could say, if the earlier court would have known our argument, maybe they would have agreed to us, then the later court could do it. Now, I don't understand exactly what he's saying. Is he saying the earlier court didn't know that the Beis Hamikdash was burnt down on the 10th? So then say like the Rashash, that they were under false information. Or l'chayra, they did know. So if they knew, that means they held, even though it burned down on the 10th, we don't agree. So how can you say, well, if they would have known, then they would have agreed? They knew. Meaning the facts are, did they know the facts that the Beis Hamikdash primarily burnt down on the 10th?
Yeah.
If they didn't, so then just say like the Rashash, they were misled. If they knew it, that means, even though they knew it, they disagreed that you should formulate Purim on the 10th. Look at number 9. The Yad Malachi brings that on the Yad Malachi is a sefer on Klolei Hashas. It's written by an early Achroin. He says the din of Ein Bezin Yachal Levatel Divrei Bezin Chaveroi Loi Amrinon Ele B'Davar Shem Haya Bezin Rishon Kayam Loi Haya Maskem Bai is only if the first court was around, they would not agree with the decision of the later court. Aval B'Davar Shenishtana Ha'inyan, but something that the facts changed. Ilu Haya Oisei Bezin Kayam, that if the first court was around, Haya Maskem Bai, they would also agree. Ein zeh bittul dvar. That's not being mavatel their words. But I don't understand how that's relevant here. Nothing changed. Nothing changed here. Something changed in what happened on Tisha B'Av? If they didn't know, so then that's the Rashash. They were misled. If they knew, then nothing changed. Okay. I want to tell you one more, and then I'm going to tell you the Iyun answer. Okay? The next answer, I get ready like sort of threw the cat out of the bag, comes from the Rebberal Soloveitchik. Okay? I believe. So if anybody asks you, what did you do this morning? Do you learn any lamdas? What are we talking about? We learned Rebberal. Okay? Rebberal? Which Rebberal? From Brisk. Okay, you ready? This is an old split that you should all know. Try to think of a reason why moving it from the 9th of Av to the 10th of Av is not a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Levatel Divrei Bezin Chaveroi, but moving it from the 14th and 15th to 11, 12, 13 is. Reb Beryl says, when Tisha B'Av was made, did they make it on the 9th? Or does the Navi only say you fast in the 5th month, the month of Av? What does the Navi say? Tzayim Haraviv, Tzayim Chamishi, fast on the 5th month. Remember, we many years ago, how did they enact the fast days? Did they enact the 9th of Av, the 17th of Tammuz, the 10th of Teves? Or did they only say the month and later Rabbi said the day? It's machlokes.
They did say that.
Right. But the other Tanesim, they just picked the month. According to Minchas Chinuch, not everybody agrees with that. According to the position that when it comes to the fast days, they only pick the month, the answer is Pashat. The answer is Pashat. By Tisha B'Av, nobody ever decided on the 9th to begin with. They only decided on Av. So Rebbe says, let me tweak it. Oh no, Rebbe, you're violating the earlier court. Rebbe said, I'm not violating the earlier court. The earlier court never picked the day. But 14 and 15, they picked the day. You like that answer? I would say it doesn't really fit into Tosfos. Because Tosfos had a kasha. How could Rebbe uproot Tisha B'Av ein bezdin yachal levatel divrei bezdin chaveira elam ken gadol men b'chacham minyan? So what's Tosfos saying? He's only tweaking the day. So what? Ikar chaser min hasefer. We mean only tweaking the day. We see on that base he can't tweak the day. So no, because it's not a violation because nobody ever decided the day. And Tosfos doesn't say that. Meaning it's a chiluk between the two cases, but the approach doesn't fit into the words of Tosfos unless maybe yesh ladun. Would you call this Iyun or Bekiyus? Chayra, it's Bekiyus. You have two identical cases, and the way you're splitting it is by bringing it an outside yediyah. By the way, remember the old Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch says they never established the day, they only established the month. Now I'm going to tell you an Iyun answer. Okay? I'm going to tell you Geshmaka Iyun answer. I think it's based on the Brisker Rav. He doesn't say the whole thing. It's Mamish Bar Kachama. It's so beautiful. Right now, it looks like two identical cases. Where Tosfos says moving Tisha B'Av from the 9th to the 10th is not a violation of Ein Bezin Yachal Levatel Divrei Bezin Chaveira. But moving from the 14th and 15th Adar to 11, 12, 13 is a violation. What's the difference? Say it like this. Did they enact the 9th? Did the Bezdin come and say, we enact the 9th? If they did, then you see that changing a date is not an issue. So why can't we change to 14th and 15th? I'll argue like this. They never enacted the 9th. You say, you're going like Reb Beryl because it was only the month. No, I'm not going like Reb Beryl. I'll say that rabbis, when they make Tanesim, they make a day. But when the rabbis came and they said they made the day, did they say we make the 9th? Or they said, we are misakein to fast on the day that commemorates the event at the time the event happened. They didn't say the 9th. They said we're misakein that Klal Yisrael has to fast to commemorate the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. But not so. We say, how about let's fast as Sesame Tshuva? No, they said part of our legislation is you're going to fast to commemorate the tragedy on the day the tragedy happened. Rebbe comes along and says, okay, fast the 10th. Oh, but you're not greater than us. I'm not arguing on you. I'm not arguing on you. I also am fasting to commemorate the tragedy on the day the tragedy happened, which is the 10th. I'm not arguing on you. If you say they legislated the 9th, then yes, Rebbe moving it to the 10th is arguing on the earlier sages. But you could argue the earlier sages didn't say the 9th. They said fast on the day to commemorate the tragedy on the day the tragedy happened. So Rebbe said, great, let's do the 10th. That's the day the tragedy happened. I'm not arguing on the earlier court. But if the earlier court would have made 14 and 15, that means they're saying, celebrate Purim, commemorate the miracle of Purim on the day that the miracle was appreciated. So later people could come and say, pick 11, 12, and 13. Nothing happened on 11, 12, 13. You're uprooting the original enactment. The original enactment was commemorate the event biyoim she'ira, on the day it occurred. It occurred on the 10th of Av. It did not occur on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. It did not occur on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. In other words, what I'm saying is different than Reb Beryl. You don't have to go, even according to the Shittos, that the rabbis make the date, but let's analyze how they formulate it. Do they formulate the 9th, or is it formulated on the day that the event happened? If you say the latter and not the former, then you could switch it, you could tweak it to the 10th, because the 10th is still the day that it happened. You can't tweak it from 14, 15 to 11, 12, and 13. And that's why the Gemara has to say, the reason they were able to do it is they darshan from a pasuk. Had it not been for the pasuk, they wouldn't be allowed to do it. What do you call this answer? This is Iyun. Which is better?
Shmak is always going to be Iyun.
Iyun is going to be, it's more charif, it's more oiker harim, it's oiker, right? It's to do Iyun. It's not always right. It doesn't mean it's correct. Sometimes Bekiyus is more correct. The joke is, the Gemara says, what's greater, oiker harim or Sinai? So the Gemara says Sinai is greater than oiker harim. So Pinchas Hirschsprung would say, why is Sinai greater than oiker harim? Let the oiker harim come and be oiker to Sinai. Oiker harim means to uproot a mountain. So let it come and be oiker Sinai. So he can't find it. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't have the Bekiyus. Yeah? Remember that one? Okay. Anyway, what I just bring into your attention is there's a very, in the Hakdama of the Sefer Levushe Mordechai, think of Machon Maggid Harakiah, he brings the proper approach to learning. He says that the Iker Yedias HaTorah is to know it b'derech pilpul and derech charifus. However, he says, without Bekiyus, your Yediyah won't work, because you won't have the Yediyos, you won't have the background. So therefore he says that Baduk Kitov Ma'oid, he says for Bnei Yeshiva, Ha'etza Ha'ye'utza, as soon as you're able to learn Gemara and Tosfos yourself, you should have two Limudim. One Gemara with Tosfos, and one Gemara without Tosfos, Gemara Rashi. So Gemara Tosfos is Iyun, Gemara Rashi is Bekiyus, and then an hour a day learn Ketzos HaChoshen. But just saying in general, it's meyusad that there are two chalokim in Torah, where you have to learn in depth, and you also have to learn to cover ground. Okay, Rabbi Glatstein, have a wonderful day. Bracha v'atzlacha. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.